"This is my house, Daniel. Know your place." My wife said it across our kitchen table, right in front of her mother and sister. Nobody laughed, which was unfortunate because for about half a second I genuinely thought it might have been a joke. I looked around the kitchen I had paid to renovate. Then I looked at the stainless steel refrigerator I had bought after the old one started making a noise that sounded like a lawnmower swallowing a fork. Then at the new windows behind Melissa, which I had also paid for. And then I looked back at my wife. Melissa was staring at me with that particular expression people get when they believe they've just ended an argument with one devastating sentence. "Okay," I said. "I think I finally know my place." Then I picked up my beer and asked Melissa's brother-in-law if he'd seen the game the night before. That was it. No shouting, no slammed doors, no dramatic speech about respect. I didn't throw my wedding ring onto the table. I didn't storm outside into the rain like the emotionally wounded lead in a bad movie. 3 weeks later, I moved out. 4 months after that, Melissa called me and demanded to know why the bank was threatening to repossess her car. And believe it or not, that wasn't even her biggest problem. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This whole mess started with my wife's inheritance. At the time, I thought it was the best thing that had ever happened to us. Melissa and I had been married for 8 years when her grandmother died. Before anyone gets the wrong impression, our marriage wasn't some disaster waiting for an excuse to explode. We were normal. We argued about whose turn it was to buy groceries. She watched home renovation shows and announced that knocking down walls was actually pretty easy. I had once spent an entire Saturday replacing a bathroom faucet, so I knew better. But we were good together. Or at least I thought we were. I worked in project management for an engineering company. I made good money. Not private jet money. I forgot I owned that house money. But enough that we were comfortable and I could save a decent amount every month. Melissa worked too. She earned less than I did, so early in our marriage we'd fallen into a financial arrangement that seemed reasonable. I covered most of our major expenses: rent, utilities, insurance, a larger share of groceries, most vacations, unexpected repairs. Melissa contributed too, but because I handled more of the monthly costs, she was able to save a significant part of her salary. Neither of us kept score. At least, I didn't. The goal was simple: a house. We'd been renting for years, and every time the lease came up for renewal, our landlord discovered another exciting new number he wanted us to pay. Apparently, the house was appreciating in value purely because we continued existing inside it. So we saved, and talked about mortgages, and looked at listings, and occasionally visited open houses where a realtor would describe a closet as a flexible lifestyle space. Then Melissa's grandmother passed away. She had lived alone in a large house outside town for decades. Melissa had been close to her, so the loss hit her hard. The inheritance came later. One evening, Melissa sat beside me on the couch holding a folder from the attorney handling the estate. She looked stunned. "My grandmother left me the house." I stared at her. "The whole house?" "The whole house." "No cousins hidden in the attic?" She laughed. "No. No mysterious second family?" "Daniel, I'm just making sure this isn't the first 10 minutes of a legal thriller." She smacked my arm with the folder. Then she started crying, because it had been her grandmother's home. I pulled her against me and held her while she cried. And I remember thinking how strange life was. We'd spent years trying to save enough to buy a house. Suddenly we had one. Or technically, Melissa had one. That distinction didn't matter to me then. She was my wife. We were married. We were building a life together. So naturally, I thought it would become our home. A few weeks later, we drove out there together. The place was beautiful. Or, more accurately, it had once been beautiful and was currently negotiating with gravity. It wasn't falling apart. It just had the sort of problems old houses collect when they've been owned by someone who believes anything can be repaired, with enough duct tape and determination. The roof needed work. Several windows needed replacing. The heating system was ancient. The kitchen was so outdated I half expected to open a cabinet and find Jimmy Carter's campaign poster inside. There were plumbing issues. Some of the electrical work needed updating. The backyard had become an independent ecosystem. I stood in the kitchen while Melissa opened cabinets. One door came off in her hand. She stared at it. I stared at her. "Well," I said, "open concept." She laughed so hard she had to lean against the counter. That was Melissa then. That's the part I sometimes have trouble reconciling with what came later. She wasn't arrogant. She wasn't obsessed with ownership. She wasn't walking around announcing that everything belonged to her. She was excited. So was I. We spent that first afternoon walking from room to room making plans. We'd fix the kitchen, turn one bedroom into an office, clean up the yard, maybe build a patio someday. I wanted part of the garage for a workbench and some tools. Melissa wanted a bigger closet. We stood in the backyard as the sun was going down, looking at this old house that needed far more work than either of us had expected. Melissa slipped her arm around mine. "Can you believe it?" she asked. "What?" "We finally have our house. Our house." I remember those exact words, mostly because of how expensive they eventually became. We moved in a couple of months later. The first year was basically one long relationship with contractors. If you've never renovated an old house, congratulations on your excellent decision-making. Every repair introduced us to another repair. The roofer found water damage. The electrician found wiring that he described as creative, which is not a word you want an electrician using. The plumber stared under one bathroom sink for 30 seconds and finally said, "Huh." I learned that, from a contractor usually costs at least $800. Melissa used some of the money she'd inherited to decorate. New furniture, paint, lighting, curtains, things that made the house look good. I handled most of the things that kept the house from killing us: the roof, windows, heating, electrical work, plumbing, kitchen renovation. Over the next 2 years, I put somewhere between $45,000 and $50,000 of my savings into that house. I wasn't keeping a running spreadsheet. I only calculated it later. At the time, I didn't care. Why would I? It was our home. I wasn't investing in Melissa's real estate. I was investing in our life. And yes, legally, I understood that the house belonged to her. I wasn't completely stupid. Inheritance laws aren't exactly classified government information. The property had been left specifically to Melissa. Her name was on it, not mine. There was even a point early on when Melissa brought that up herself. We were sitting at the kitchen counter one evening going through estimates for the new windows. She was looking at the paperwork when she suddenly said, "You know, we could talk to an attorney." "About the windows?" "About the house." I looked up. "What about it?" She hesitated. "If you're going to put this much money into it, maybe we should talk about adding you somehow, to the deed or whatever." I remember smiling. Not because I thought it was funny, because I genuinely appreciated that she'd thought about it. "Mel, you're my wife. I'm not turning our marriage into a business deal. I'm serious." "So am I." I pushed the estimate toward her. "You inherited the house. That's fine. We're married. We're going to live here together. I'm not worried about getting my name stamped on every brick." She watched me for a moment. "You're sure?" "Absolutely." Then I pointed at the estimate. "I am worried that apparently windows are now handcrafted by Swiss watchmakers." She laughed. And that was the end of the conversation. No agreement, no contract, no percentage of the property, nothing. I didn't want it. Because at 37, after 8 years of marriage, I still believed there was a difference between owning a house and having a home. Turns out there is. I just didn't understand the difference yet. For the first few months, everything was fine. Then, our house started becoming my house. Not all at once. It happened in little pieces. One afternoon, Melissa decided she wanted to redo the living room. She showed me 3 furniture layouts. I liked the second one. She liked the first. We went back and forth for maybe 5 minutes before she smiled and said, "Well, technically it is my house." She said it lightly, almost as a joke, so I let it go. A few weeks later, she told me her mother was coming to stay with us. For how long? 2 or 3 weeks. I looked at her. You already told her yes? Melissa shrugged. She's my mom. I know. I just thought we'd discuss someone living with us for 3 weeks. She gave me that same little smile. Daniel, it's my house. Again, no argument, no explosion, just another brick added to the wall. Then it became the answer to everything. What furniture we bought, who could stay overnight, where things went, what we did with the garage. That last one bothered me. I had spent months turning one side of the garage into a small workshop. Nothing fancy. A workbench, shelves, tools, a few cabinets. It was one of the few spaces in the house that actually felt like mine. Then one Tuesday I came home and found everything packed into cardboard boxes. My tools were stacked against the wall. The workbench had been moved. Melissa was standing there measuring the floor. What happened? I'm turning this into a workout area. I stared at the boxes. You moved all my stuff? Yes. You could have warned me. She looked genuinely confused by the question. Why would I need permission to change something in my own house? That one landed differently. I didn't yell. I didn't start dragging the treadmill into the yard. I just stood there for a second and looked around. Then I said, right. Melissa went back to measuring. That was the first time I stopped hearing my house as a joke. After that, her mother started helping. Carol had always been opinionated, but once Melissa inherited the house, she discovered a whole new hobby, reminding everyone who owned it. At dinner one night, Carol looked around the renovated kitchen and said, Daniel landed pretty well. Free house. I smiled. Free? You should meet the guy who paid for the roof. Melissa's sister laughed. Her husband laughed. Carol gave me a tight smile. Melissa didn't laugh at all. Later, after everyone left, she confronted me in the kitchen. Why did you say that? Say what? About the roof. Because your mother said I live here for free. You didn't have to make it about money. I didn't. She did. Melissa crossed her arms. Well, the house is mine. I looked at her. Do you even hear yourself anymore? What does that mean? It means when something needs fixing, it's our house. When something needs paying for, it's our house. But the second I have an opinion, suddenly it's your house. She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. I laughed once. Right. Wouldn't want to bring drama into your house. She didn't appreciate that. I did. By then, the money had started changing too. Melissa slowly stopped paying for more and more of our shared expenses. Utilities, groceries, insurance, car maintenance, trips, restaurants, house repairs. Most of it ended up on me. Her reasoning was simple. She was providing the house. Therefore, I should handle the rest. At first, I didn't care much. I earned more. We were married. Then one evening, she complained about a repair bill and said, You should be grateful you don't have a mortgage. I looked at her. I'm sorry? You heard me. Most people pay thousands every month just to have somewhere to live. I glanced around the room. At the walls I'd helped repair, the windows I'd paid for, the heating system I'd replaced. Then back at her. So this is rent now? Melissa sighed. Oh my God, Daniel, that's not what I meant. No, I'm just saying you've benefited from the situation too. I nodded slowly. Good to know. She walked away. I stayed in the kitchen for another minute. That was when I started wondering something I probably should have asked much earlier. Was I living in our home? Or was I just the most heavily invested guest in hers? Things finally broke at a family dinner. Melissa had invited Carol, her sister's husband, and a couple of friends over. Dinner was almost finished when Melissa brought up the backyard. I've been looking at pools. I looked at her. Pools? A pool for the backyard. She pulled out her phone and showed everyone a photo. It was nice. It was also $35,000. How much? I asked. About 35. I handed the phone back. Then I hope it comes with a lifeguard and a small yacht." Her sister laughed. Melissa didn't. "I'm serious. So am I." She explained that the contractor could start that summer and that we could use money from our joint savings. That got my attention. Our joint savings existed mostly because I had been putting money into it. "I don't want to spend $35,000 on a pool." Melissa frowned. "Why not?" "Because we just replaced the heating system. We still have other repairs coming up, and 35 grand is a lot of money for somewhere to sit in water." Carol immediately joined in. "It would increase the value of the property." I looked at her. "Exactly." "What's that supposed to mean?" Melissa asked. "It means it increases the value of your house." The table went quiet. Melissa's expression changed. "Excuse me?" I kept my voice calm. "You've spent the last 2 years reminding me this house belongs to you. That's fine. But then you can't expect me to keep putting tens of thousands of dollars into it every time you want an upgrade. It's our savings. Mostly mine." That was probably the sentence that did it. Not because it was cruel, because it was true, and I had said it in front of her family. Carol shifted in her chair. Melissa stared at me. "So now you're keeping score?" "No. If I were keeping score, I would have started around the roof." Her sister's husband suddenly became extremely interested in his dinner. "Smart man." Melissa leaned back. "You live here too, Daniel." "I know. That's what I thought." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means whenever this house needs money, you talk about it like it belongs to both of us. Whenever I have an opinion, you remind me it belongs to you." Carol jumped in. "Your grandmother left this house to Melissa." I nodded. "I know, Carol. You've only mentioned it about 400 times. Her sister looked down to hide a smile. Carol didn't. Melissa's face went red. "Enough." I looked at her. "I agree." "No, Daniel. You don't get to sit here and act like you're somehow being taken advantage of." "I didn't say I was." "You're making it sound like you're entitled to this house because you paid for some repairs." "Some repairs, that was impressive." "Apparently $50,000 becomes some repairs when you're losing an argument." "I never asked for your house." "Then stop acting like you own it." "I don't." "Good." She paused. Then she said it. "This is my house, Daniel. Know your place." Silence. Complete silence. Even Carol stopped talking, which I hadn't previously known was medically possible. I looked around the kitchen. At the cabinets I'd paid to replace, the refrigerator I'd bought, the windows I'd paid for. Then I looked at Melissa. Carol had a small smile on her face. Melissa looked almost satisfied, like she'd finally reminded me how things worked. And suddenly, everything became very simple. "You're right," I said. Melissa blinked. "I think I finally do." Then I turned to her brother-in-law. "So, did you see the game last night?" He stared at me for half a second. Then, bless him, he understood the assignment. "Yeah." And just like that, the argument was over. At least as far as Melissa knew. After everyone left, she found me loading the dishwasher. "You're seriously not going to say anything?" "About what?" She folded her arms. "What happened at dinner? I thought you made yourself pretty clear." "Oh, come on. Are you going to sulk now?" "No." "You're not angry?" "Not really." That seemed to bother her more than anger would have. "Then what?" "Nothing." She stared at me, waiting for the fight. I didn't give her one. I finished loading the dishwasher, went upstairs, showered, and went to bed. The next morning, I went to work. At lunch, I went to the bank. I opened a personal account, changed my direct deposit. Then I went through every automatic payment connected to our joint account and made a list. Insurance, utilities, subscriptions, car payments, house expenses. That evening, I started separating what was mine from what was hers. 2 days later, I started looking at apartments. I didn't tell Melissa. Not because I was trying to surprise her. There was simply nothing left to discuss. She had spent 2 years explaining the arrangement to me. I had finally listened, and Melissa noticed absolutely nothing. She still asked what I wanted for dinner, still complained about work, still sent me links to backyard designs. At one point, she sent me another pool, $38,000 this time. Apparently, the solution to our disagreement was inflation. Meanwhile, I signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment 20 minutes from work. Nothing luxurious. Clean kitchen, small balcony, underground parking. Most importantly, nobody living there could tell me to know my place, because I was paying for it. 3 weeks after that dinner, I came home with packing boxes. Melissa was sitting on the couch. She watched me carry the first stack upstairs. "What are those for?" "Moving." She laughed. Then she saw my face. The laugh disappeared. "Moving where?" "My apartment." She stared at me. "Your what?" "I rented an apartment." For the first time in weeks, Melissa had absolutely nothing to say. It was refreshing. Melissa stared at me. "You rented an apartment?" "Yes." "Without telling me?" "I'm telling you now." She stood up and followed me upstairs while I started packing clothes. "This is insane. You're moving out because of one stupid sentence?" I stopped and looked at her. "No." "Then what the hell is this?" "That sentence just explained everything else." "What does that even mean?" "It means when the roof needed replacing, it was our house. When the heating system died, it was our house. When the kitchen needed renovating, it was our house. When bills showed up, it was our house." Melissa opened her mouth, but I kept going. "When I wanted a workshop in the garage, it became your house. When your mother moved in for 3 weeks without anyone asking me, it was your house. When I didn't want to spend $35,000 on a pool, you reminded me again that it was your house. So you're destroying an 8-year marriage because I said something while I was angry?" "No. I'm leaving because what you said finally made the last 2 years make sense." She stared at me. I put another stack of shirts into the box. "You told me to know my place." I closed the box. "So I'm going to my place." For once, she didn't have a response. Over the next few days, I packed what was clearly mine. Clothes, tools, my computer, personal documents, a few things I'd owned before we married. I didn't strip the house. I didn't take the refrigerator because I'd paid for it. I didn't unscrew the windows and load them into a truck, although I'll admit the mental image improved my mood. I left the furniture, the appliances, everything we'd been using together. I wasn't trying to punish Melissa. I was simply leaving. That distinction became important later. On moving day, she stood in the driveway while I loaded the last box into my car. "You're really doing this?" "Yes." "And what am I supposed to do?" I looked at the large house behind her. The house she'd spent 2 years reminding me belonged entirely to her. "Whatever you want." Then I drove away. The first night in my apartment was strange. It was quiet. There were boxes everywhere. I ate takeout sitting on the floor because I hadn't bought a dining table yet. And somehow, I felt more at home there than I had in Melissa's house for months. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call friends and announce my freedom. I just started living my own life and paying my own bills. Only my own bills. That was when Melissa discovered something neither of us had ever really discussed. Our lifestyle was expensive. She just hadn't realized how expensive because most of the bills never reached her. The electricity bill arrived, then water, internet, homeowner's insurance, property taxes, yard maintenance, house maintenance, her car payment, her car insurance, groceries, all the little expenses that don't seem like much individually, but apparently form a criminal organization when they arrive in the same month. The first month, Melissa managed. She had savings. She had a salary. And of course, she had no mortgage. That last part had always sounded very impressive when she said it to me. By the second month, the tone changed. She called me one afternoon while I was at work. "Why didn't my car insurance get paid?" "No hello? No how are you? Straight to customer service?" "I don't know. It always comes out of our account." "Not anymore." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "I closed the joint account." "You what?" "I closed it after I moved out. You can't just do that. It was empty except for my money, and there were no outstanding payments. You should have warned me. About your car insurance? Yes. I leaned back in my chair. Melissa, it's your car. We're married. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Interesting. What? I thought we were discussing ownership. Don't start. I didn't. You did. This is unbelievably petty. No. Petty would have been taking the refrigerator. Another pause. She exhaled sharply. So you're just not paying anything anymore? I pay my expenses. You pay yours. We never did things that way before. No. Before we were treating things as ours. She went quiet. I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, I'm just not confusing yours with ours anymore. She hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A few weeks later, she called again. This time she wasn't angry. She sounded worried. Daniel, we need to talk about the house. I almost corrected her immediately. Almost. What happened? We had that storm last night. There's water getting into the basement. That got my attention. The house had always had drainage issues, but nothing serious. How bad? I had someone look at it. They think there's a problem with the drainage around the foundation. I already knew what was coming. How much? $23,000. I closed my eyes. Of course it was $23,000. Old houses don't believe in 4-digit emergencies. Melissa continued. I can't cover all of it right now. I said nothing. Daniel, I need help. There it was. Not, we need help. Not yet. How much are you asking for? Half would help. I actually looked at my phone to make sure I'd heard correctly. You want me to put $11,500 into the house? Yes. The house I don't live in. We're still married. The house you told me was yours. Oh my God, Daniel, seriously? Absolutely. This is a real problem. If we don't fix it, it could damage the foundation. I understand. So you should fix it. With what money? I paused, then said, Melissa, I genuinely hope you figure it out, but I'm not putting another $11,000 into property where I was told I needed to remember I had no place. You're punishing me? No. That's exactly what you're doing. If I were punishing you, I'd be enjoying this. I wasn't. And that was the truth. I didn't want her basement flooded. I didn't want the house damaged. I didn't want Melissa broke. I just wasn't willing to finance her problems anymore. She had wanted a very clear line between what belonged to her and what belonged to me. I was finally respecting it. Apparently, she liked that line a lot better when I was standing on the expensive side of it. 2 days after the foundation conversation, Carol called me. I knew it was coming. There are certain things in life you can predict. Taxes, traffic, and your mother-in-law appearing the moment her daughter stops winning an argument. Daniel, we need to talk. Apparently nobody in Melissa's family believed in hello anymore. Okay. What you're doing to Melissa is cruel. What am I doing? You left your wife over one argument. I didn't leave because of one argument. She said something stupid because she was angry. I agree. Then come home. No. Carol went quiet. Clearly, this wasn't how she'd pictured the conversation going. You've been married 8 years. I know exactly how long I've been married. Then act like a husband. I almost laughed. Carol, your daughter spent 2 years reminding me that the house belonged to her. Because it does. That doesn't mean you abandon your responsibilities. What responsibilities? Your wife? The house? The house you just reminded me belongs to Melissa? Silence. I could practically hear the machinery overheating. Finally, she said, You know what I mean? I really don't. You helped maintain that house for years. So now you're just going to let it fall apart? Carol, you can't argue that I have no claim to the house and then argue that I'm responsible for maintaining it. She got angry. A real man doesn't walk away from his wife because his feelings got hurt. That one actually made me smile. I agree. I didn't leave because Melissa insulted me. She said it was her house. She said I needed to know my place, so I stopped putting my money into something she made very clear wasn't mine. She didn't mean it like that. She meant it every other time she said it. That's ridiculous. Then we probably don't have anything else to discuss. Carol hung up shortly after that. She didn't call again. Over the next couple of months, I heard less from Melissa. There was a reason. She was busy discovering mathematics. For years, she'd looked at our finances and seen the biggest missing expense: no mortgage. What she hadn't seen were the 20 smaller expenses standing behind it with knives. The house needed maintenance. The yard needed maintenance. Property taxes were higher than she'd remembered. Insurance had gone up. The foundation repair couldn't be ignored. Her car still had payments. Credit cards had balances. And apparently electricity companies remained stubbornly unwilling to accept "but I own the house" as payment. Melissa used savings at first, then credit cards. Then she financed part of the foundation work. The pool disappeared from conversation completely, a tragic loss for the neighborhood. At some point, she sold a few things she'd bought after receiving the inheritance. Then she started cutting expenses: restaurants, shopping, weekend trips. The lifestyle she'd considered normal suddenly became something she had to calculate. And for the first time, she started calculating me too. She called one evening. Her voice was different, not angry, not demanding. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How much were you paying every month when you lived here?" "For what?" "Everything." I gave her a number. There was a long silence. "That much?" "Sometimes more." "That can't be right." "It is." Then she said something I never expected. "I thought you were getting the better deal." I laughed, not because it was funny, because after everything there wasn't much else to do. "Because I didn't pay rent?" "Yes." "Melissa, I put almost $50,000 into that house. The house was free to you. Living in it wasn't." For once, she didn't argue. A few weeks passed. Then one Saturday afternoon, Melissa texted me. "Can we talk in person?" I almost said no, but I agreed. She came to my apartment the next evening. It was the first time she'd been there. She walked in and looked around. My apartment wasn't impressive. 2 bedrooms, basic furniture, a small kitchen, a balcony. Everything in it was mine. Melissa sat on the couch. I took the chair across from her. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I was wrong." I waited. She looked at me. "Aren't you going to say anything?" "I'm waiting to find out what you were wrong about." She gave me a tired smile. "The house, the money, you. I got weird after Grandma died." She looked down at her hands. At first, I was just protective of the house because it came from her. Then Mom kept telling me I needed to be careful. Careful of what? You. That surprised me. Me? She kept saying the house was my inheritance, that I shouldn't let marriage blur ownership, that women lose things in divorces because they don't protect themselves. I stared at her. We weren't getting divorced. I know. We weren't even having serious problems. I know. So your mother convinced you to protect yourself from a divorce that wasn't happening? When you say it like that, it sounds stupid. I don't know another way to say it. Melissa nodded. It was stupid. She took a breath. I started seeing every decision about the house as me giving up control. Every time you disagreed with me, I felt like you were trying to claim something that belonged to me. I never asked for it. I know that now. You knew it then. She looked away. That answer was enough. After a moment, she said, "I want you to come home." I didn't answer. "We can fix this." Melissa. "No, listen." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. For one bizarre second, I wondered if she'd brought me another contractor estimate. Instead, she placed the folder on the table. "I talked to an attorney." I looked at it. "About what?" "The house." She opened the folder. "I can add you to the deed." That actually surprised me. She pushed the papers toward me. "We can make it 50-50. I looked at the documents. 2 years earlier, that would have meant something. Now I didn't even touch them. No. Melissa stared at me. What? I don't want it. You put $50,000 into that house. I know. Then take half. No. Her face tightened. I thought this was what you wanted. That was never what I wanted. Then what did you want? I looked at her. I wanted to have a home. You did. No. I had permission to live in your house as long as I remembered who owned it. That isn't fair. Maybe not, but that's how it felt. She looked down at the papers. I pushed the folder gently back toward her. I never wanted half your house, Melissa. I wanted to feel like I had a home. And that was the moment she finally understood that the problem wasn't something an attorney could fix. Melissa stayed quiet for a while. Then she asked the question I'd known was coming. So what happens now? I looked at her. I think we should get divorced. She closed her eyes. Daniel, I'm not saying it to hurt you. You just said you wanted a home. I'm offering you half of it. And 3 months ago, that might have mattered. So, I'm too late? Yes. She looked genuinely hurt. I hated that. But feeling sorry for someone isn't the same as trusting them again. Living alone had given me something I hadn't expected. Perspective. For years, I'd been the person who handled things. A bill came in, I paid it. Something broke, I arranged the repair. We needed something, I usually covered it. Carol crossed a line, I kept the peace. Melissa dismissed something I wanted, I told myself it wasn't worth an argument. I had called that being a good husband. Maybe some of it was. But somewhere along the way, Melissa had started treating my effort like a utility. Always available, automatically included, preferably paid on time, and I had helped teach her that. She wiped her eyes. Is there really nothing I can do? I don't think so. She nodded slowly. Then she picked up the folder. There was no screaming, no dramatic last attempt to convince me. She just stood at the door for a moment and said, I really am sorry. I know. Then she left. I filed for divorce shortly afterward. Melissa kept the house. I never challenged that. My attorney told me we could potentially argue about some of the money I'd put into improvements. I thought about it for approximately 6 seconds. No. He raised an eyebrow. You're sure? I don't want the house. This isn't about getting the house. I know. I don't want another year of my life tied to it either. So I took what was clearly mine and walked away. Melissa kept her inheritance. I kept my savings, my retirement accounts, and the assets that belonged to me. The divorce wasn't pleasant, but it wasn't a war. For once, neither of us needed to win. About a year later, I bought a house. Nothing huge. 2 bedrooms, a garage, a small backyard. The first thing I did after moving in was build a workbench in the garage. Nobody put it in boxes. Nobody turned the space into a gym. Nobody reminded me whose garage it was. Melissa and I spoke only occasionally after the divorce. Through mutual friends, I heard she'd sold the SUV. The pool, unsurprisingly, never happened. Apparently, financial hardship had robbed the world of $35,000 worth of backyard water. Eventually, she put the big house up for sale. That surprised me. She sold it later that year and moved somewhere smaller. I didn't celebrate. I never wanted Melissa to lose her grandmother's house. I never wanted her buried in bills. I never wanted our marriage to end. But I also didn't want to keep losing pieces of myself just for the privilege of living somewhere I was constantly reminded wasn't mine. For a long time, I wondered whether I'd overreacted. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe we could have fixed it earlier. Maybe I should have fought harder. Then I'd remember that dinner. This is my house, Daniel. Know your place. And I realized something. Melissa had been right about one thing. I did need to know my place. My place was wherever I was treated like a partner. Funny enough, it turned out to be the best advice she gave me in 8 years of marriage. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.